2. All right, we are live. Hello and welcome everyone to another Chat and Learn here with Power to Fly. This is our first Chat and Learn to kick off 2022, so I'm super excited to have lots of folks here joining us live today. And I just want to say thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to have this really important conversation. Lots of things are changing in the world, and that means you are called to change too. So I'm really excited to hear what our guest speaker has to offer today, as you all have submitted some great questions previous to this conversation in preparation. And I know that folks are still joining this call, so thank you all for joining. We're just getting started. If you haven't already, go ahead and drop in the chat box. Let us know where you are in the world. I'll give you all a shout out here shortly. I'm calling all the way from Argentina and Patagonia. Rachel, our guest speaker, is calling from New York City. So if you are joining us today, go ahead and drop in the chat box. Let's get the chat box live already. Let us know where you are, and I'll give you all a brief shout out here when we get started and I go through the chat box. But I just wanted to kick us off by first going over some quick housekeeping rules, and just so that everyone feels comfortable and confident in this next hour. So again, you could be doing anything else with your time, but you're deciding to spend it with us. So I encourage you all to participate. And you can participate in a number of ways. You can turn your cameras on if you feel called to do so. I know that this might be some of you all just kicking off the year with some virtual events. So I don't want to, pressure anyone to turn their cameras on, but we would love to see your beautiful smiling faces here for the next hour. So this is a safe digital space. You are welcome to turn your cameras on. We believe in visibility here at Power to Fly. And so please feel free to do so if you feel called to do so. Otherwise, feel free to just drop anything in the chat box, any questions, reflections, any tips and tricks of your own, and we will be engaging in the chat box together. I've muted everyone upon entrance just to avoid any background noise, but I can't stress enough, we want to hear from you. So feel free to hop off of mute whenever you've got something you'd like to share. I just ask that we be respectful of everyone's voices and have one person off of mute at a time. And if you do hop off mute, you will be featured in our live recording as this is being recorded. And so this is actually a good moment to remind you all, if you signed up for this chat, you will be getting a rewatch email with links to the resources that our guest speaker might bring up throughout the hour, as well as a link to this recorded video for you to share with your community, your peers, your family and friends. So be looking out for that email. And in the meantime, again, participate right in the chat box. If anyone has any sensitive information and you prefer to be kept anonymous, please find me in the chat box under Mariella Marie. You can write to me privately there, and I will raise your question or your reflection and keep you anonymous, just so that we can make sure that your voice is being heard as well. The last thing I'll say is we'd love for you to follow Power to Fly on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can keep up with all the great chats we've got in store for you this year. And if this is your first time joining a chat where I'm moderating, I'll just take a brief moment to introduce myself. So I'm originally from Los Angeles, California, currently live in Patagonia and San Martin de los Andes, the original lands of the Mapuche people. And I love speaking about how we can deepen our emotional intelligence at home, at work, and at play. So I might bring some of my reflections to that note. If anyone is interested in philosophizing about emotional intelligence and sharing practical ways of how we can practice that, please feel free to drop that in the chat box, as I feel we have a lot of work to do there with building our emotional intelligence. Otherwise, I invite you all to support the work that I'm doing at the Positive Force team. You can go to thepositiveforceteam.org. You can sign up for our newsletter, or I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn. In just a few moments, I'll also invite you all to network in the chat box and drop either your LinkedIns or your websites or your projects, your preferred ways of just connecting so that we can try to maximize our time here and really, deepen our digital community space here. So feel free, if you want to already hop on that, go ahead and drop your preferred ways of connecting in the chat box. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to our guest speaker, Rachel. Let us know a little bit about yourself, how you came to learn about Power to Fly, and what you're excited to share with us today, Rachel.
Yeah, I'll very quickly go through my background. I started out in sort of the corporate finance world. I was at Goldman Sachs and Bridgewater, but really informally on the side of my job, I was referred to hundreds of professionals to help them with their careers. And over those few years, I learned a lot of patterns of the challenges that people were facing, and then kind of realized I enjoyed doing it. I had value, and I leaned in to get training and certified. And then ever since, I've been building my own tools to really systematize and scale there's a digital component as well as coaching to make sure that every professional can be intentional with every career decision. I've done career coaching through other organizations, Flatiron School, WeWork, Columbia University, Project Activate, and others. I teach an entrepreneurship class. And that's, I did a tech MBA at NYU Stern. So, if graduate school is a question you're considering, that's always another decision to be made. But that's me in a nutshell. I'm happy to dive into anything from my background if there's any questions or anything relevant, but that's the quickest version of the story.
Awesome. And I know you're probably going to share a little bit more about your journey, your personal journey, your career journey as you dive into the questions that folks have submitted previous to this conversation. So feel free to share as much as you'd like there. But just to set the stage, I'd love, Rachel, for you to go over some principal themes for today's conversation. And then I know you've got a beautiful presentation to kick us off with.
Yes. So today we're going to talk about a few things. So, the first step in any career change is to figure out kind of what you need more of or less of and how you're doing and sort of what's serving you and what's not and where you can improve in your journey. So we're going to talk about that. From there, I like to deliver some frameworks and processes so that you can understand how to strengthen the clarity in what it is that would be the best fit for you, and how to efficiently go get that and forge that path, right? So clarifying the path and forging the path, specifically job searching in a strategic way. We're going to talk about change in general, because just even assessing how you feel and knowing when you're ready for a change or if you're ready for a change. Sometimes people really grapple with, how do I know? Am I ready? And then sometimes we wait a long time, right? So how do we tap in and be self-aware about, when and if we're ready? And then, of course, how do you make it actionable? How do you have that accountability, structure, support, et cetera, to really make it happen, which is half the battle. So that's the high level overview. There's a lot here. We'll get into as much as we can today, but of course, happy to follow up after today, because as you can see, there's so many components to this.
Absolutely. And actually, this is a good segue into, folks want to continue the conversation after the hour. Rachel, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yes, I will put some links here. I offer a free initial career coaching call. So if you want to chat one-on-one, that Calendly link is my calendar, and that's our website. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome. And I see we've got folks turning their cameras on. Thank you all for participating in that way. I see we've got folks also dropping their preferred ways of connecting in the chat box. I see some LinkedIn's happening there. So yes, I really like to, start to practice what we preach here on these chat and learns, which is how can we strengthen our network? How can we learn and grow together? So feel free to drop your preferred ways of connecting in the chat box there. And also, Rachel, before you get started with your presentation, I just want to shout out where folks are calling from so that you can keep that in mind too. Maybe what's happening, in certain corners of the world, and you can be a little more specific, or if not, we can just see that we are, a global community here online today. So again, Rachel's calling from New York City. I'm calling from Patagonia in Argentina. We've got Brooklyn representing, Chicago, Peru, Canada. We've got Indiana, Wisconsin, Washington, D.C., Seattle. We've got the Bay Area, New York City again, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Chicago suburbs, San Diego, Seattle, awesome, Paris, France, Los Angeles, Atlanta. Great. It's good to see that you all are already participating in the chat box. And I just want to, I'm going to sound like a broken record. Please make use of this next hour by connecting in the chat box, dropping your preferred ways of connecting, and, dropping any questions or reflections or your own tips and tricks that you have found useful as you are navigating these uncertain waters and finding ways to change your career. So Rachel, go ahead and take it over. And thank you again for being here today.
Yeah, of course. And Marielle, I love your focus. It's clear to me as a career coach that your focus and your passion is emotional intelligence, because I can tell how present you are. You're already encouraging all of our presence and focus today. It's like, wow, I can see when somebody's doing what they love, right? So, okay. Here we go. I'm going to dive in. So guys, I do have some slides, just because it's going to be a precursor. Some of the questions you guys have, I wanted to get ahead of them. And then we are going to do the Q&A with your pre-submitted questions after. Feel free to add questions in the chat. I'm going to go a little quickly just because I want to get this out there. And then, like I said, we can always follow up and make this actionable for you, but I want to deliver as much as I can. And you guys can see my screen, right? Okay. All right. We already went over my background, so I'm going to skip over that. How to consider and clarify if you want a career change. Readiness is kind of that first question, and sometimes it's like not clear to know how you feel. So we're going to talk about that. You want to think about how long you've been thinking about this. That's like a really good signal of how you feel and how strongly you might feel about change. Ask yourself, in your current path, how engaged are you? Has there been a feeling, even if you can't pinpoint the feeling, but something that's you're needing and wanting more, but maybe you're not sure what that looks like? Are you aware of what could be next? Sometimes without clarity of what's next or how to go about it, we just sort of are maybe take inaction, so to speak. So these are some questions to start considering in terms of your readiness for change. What do you want and need, right? Is your potential and your challenge being fulfilled? What do you feel that you need in a career versus want in a career? And how does your current role stack up? These are some thought exercises, writing exercises that you can do to start to elicit, like, am I ready to at least explore what might be out there for me? What's maybe holding you back? Limiting beliefs sometimes is a really big component of this thing, and it's normal and it's valid to have these thoughts, but we want to make sure we're aware of what may be holding you back, because sometimes it's subconscious, right? Is there a hesitation? Is it your capabilities? Is it something about failing? I mean, it could be any number of things, but bring those things to the surface so you can tackle it and realize whether it's maybe irrational or is there some way of alleviating that feeling, right? So understanding if there's anything holding you back. And what would you have to embrace in order to explore the potential of what you could become? And, there's certain traits we want you to embody. It's not always easy to do, but, can you think about where and how you feel now, what might be holding you back versus where do you need to feel in order to open yourself up to the best outcomes you can achieve? You want to be open-minded. You want to be creative. You want to be vulnerable. You want to be brave. You want to be confident, right? And so the mindset is the first most important piece whenever you're considering what's next for you. We can talk about accountability, we can talk about practical strategy, but you need to sort of get ready with yourself, in order to embrace the practicality of what's next, right? So next step would be, okay, how are you feeling in the current stage of your career, right? Where are you at? What's missing? How can we identify the gaps to narrow in on what you might need more of or less of? So we talked about how long have you been thinking about the change? How frequently do you think about the change? How intense is that feeling? And key challenges, what's missing, from what you have right now, and any hesitations. Again, food for thought as you're thinking about that current state of how things are going right now. So areas for improvement, okay? So the first area I like to think about is, I call it function, but it's essentially a role in the sense of your day-to-day, the skills, the activities, the projects, the action phrases and verbs of literally the style of the work of what you're doing, right? So ask yourself, how's it going in terms of just kind of the nature of that day-to-day? And here we go. I have some questions. What elements, if any, do you enjoy, and what functions would you like to do more of or less of, right? So you're thinking just about the functions of the role. The second piece is what I call content. It's essentially industry, but it's essentially the nature of it. So for example, if you're an engineer, what type of app are you building, right? Like there's a separation between your role and the industry is essentially like, what is this company producing, delivering, for whom, why, and how, right? So why are we all here? What problem are we solving? Those are two separate things. A lot of roles can exist in many industries, right? So what elements of the industry do you align with, and what problem areas would you like to contribute towards? Sometimes a career change could be as simple as same role, different industry, or maybe it's different role, same, vice versa. So each of these pieces, you might need a change in both and an improvement in both, or you might need an improvement in just one. I'm going to add a third layer. So these are the three core components. Environment. The popular phrase might be company culture. I like to think of it as environment. So what does it look and feel like physically, but also the personality of the people and the values? What elements of the company culture do you align with, and what do you need more of or less of in a work environment, right? It's the people, the values, the personality, as well as the physical. Is it remote? All those kinds of things, the bells and whistles, right? Okay, so finding a job you love, sometimes this becomes this fluffy thing, but I'm here to tell you that it's actually beneficial to find that. Okay, so studies show that when you love what you do, you get better at it, you make more money, and you make more money faster. Okay, so it's actually worthwhile to go figure out what this thing is. It also makes your job search more efficient and more effective, right? If you know where you want to target in, it's going to be easier and quicker for you to narrow in on your next steps. And it's going to be more effective because in your interviews, you're actually going to have a really compelling story that you believe. Sometimes we show up to interviews, we tell them what they want to hear versus let's actually get those answers for yourself before you have to have someone else, asking you those questions. And it makes it much more organic. When you get into a role that you really love, the steps after that just becomes such an easier way to pave the rest of the journey once you're already in a team that you're, really thriving in. And of course, the feeling, my clients, when they come in, super stressed, uncertain, when they leave, it's relief, it's excitement. It feels great to have certainty and confidence about a path that is interesting and important and aligned with you. It's a feeling you really can't replace. All right, so what is career exploration? I define this because I've defined it. And I don't often hear a lot of other people necessarily using the phrase. So this is a process before the job search where you can learn and reflect in order to compare, contrast, and narrow in on which path you're confident in pursuing, specifically which role, which industry, and which environment. So the whole point here is allow yourself to be in a phase of just figuring that out before you apply anywhere, okay? Why should it come before job searching? We talked about the efficiency. We talked about interview effectiveness. And of course, it makes it all the more likely that you're going to feel like you will thrive in that next step. Why job search if we're not confident that that next step is going to be the right or best or better, next step for you? So here's what career exploration looks like. Step one is committing. You have to ask yourself, am I ready to figure out my direction? That will take a little time and effort. You have to sort of ask yourself if you're ready to go on that journey. From there, reflection on your interests. So essentially, I have an assessment, but you could do this on your own where you would start reflecting on those three components: function, content, environment. From there, you would want to narrow in on some roles and industries that are just options. Oftentimes, assessments are going to spit out an answer. Rather, I would say come up with some options that feel viable, relevant, interesting. And then we want to learn more about what those things really are. A big reason that people don't really know what it is that they want is because they don't know enough about what's out there and really understanding those roles, as well as know enough about themselves. So what we want to do is a little bit of research, but mostly networking. And there's a lot of creative ways to network effectively to understand what these roles and industries are really, really like. And experiential learning is a component. Usually people jump to this too quickly. I usually leave experiential learning for the very end. When you're 95% certain that the path might be right for you, maybe you could do a course or certification or shadow somebody, volunteer, get your hands exposed a little bit. And then iteration is key. You might learn in this process, there are roles you like or don't like. So iterating as you're learning in order to get closer to figuring out what that direction is. From there, you can move into job search and, of course, job fulfillment. So you see how there's a process here, precursor process that's really going to benefit you. If you still have options, it means more learning and or more reflection. There is a feeling of certainty and confidence about what direction is right for you. It is a thing that is feasible, is what I'm trying to say. So if you still have options, keep learning, keep reflecting, and you will get to that point of feeling certain about the best path for you. I also say if your career search isn't fun, your job won't be either. So when you're networking, you should be talking to people about topics and problems that are interesting and enjoyable to you, right? Oftentimes job search feels like work, but you should be looking those networking conversations, what I usually say, it's like a mirror into the work. The interviews are a mirror, right? And so if you're just kind of like cookie cutter having these conversations, let's take a step back. Who do you want to talk to about what and why? Right? So determining the path forward, at this point, okay, so this is going to be a big complex flow chart of thought processes, but basically, do you have clarity on the role? And if you do have clarity on the role, is it an internal move you can do? If you don't have clarity, go figure that out. You can either pursue internal mobility, or of course you can pursue external job search. If you're thinking about industry, do you have clarity on the industry you want to pursue? If you have clarity, does it align with your current path or not? If you don't have clarity, go explore. And of course, if it aligns, stay. And if it doesn't, job search. This is, hopefully relatively obvious, but you can sort of find where you fall in this little map here. And of course, culture, right? You might be in the right role, right industry, but maybe it's not a great culture. And that's all the reason to go find a different environment. So does that culture align with you? Yes or no, right? And reflecting on what you need in each of these components is half the battle to be able to go find that in the world, right? All right, so action planning. This is the accountability. Determine your goal. Is it finding clarity? Is it upskilling? Is it job searching? What is the goal that you need to achieve? Create a timeline. When do you want to achieve it by? Work it into your routine. This is key. And this is where a coach can really help, because especially if you have a full-time job and you're doing this on the side, or if you're not working, it's also difficult to figure out how to structure your day. How and when are you going to get this done? Honestly, that's sometimes half the difficulty. And what tools are going to help you stay on track? And what format of support do you need? Is it peer accountability? Is it blogs and books? Is it coach? Is it a mentor? What support is going to help you to the finish line? This is just a little bit about kind of what I do. And then we'll move into that Q&A. But basically, I help people through this very journey. We just talked about that. And then from there, of course, helping them with branding, job search, upskilling, all of those types of things. And this is just a tiny bit about my company. We teach you what to do, guide how do you do it, and give you a workspace, and of course, support from a coach. So that's the little bit I wanted to share with you up front, because I know there's so much we could talk about with career change, and I want to get to the questions that we have, but hopefully this was a little bit helpful to start our conversation.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for providing the background here, because I know you can totally dive in deeper. And I definitely encourage folks to check out the link that Rachel dropped in the chat to book some time with her, and also get to learn more about what her company that you told me when we were offline, it's been 4 years. You told me that you all are 4 years now. Great. Congratulations on that. So lots of information, lots of wisdom, that they've got to share. I just want to highlight some of my favorite bits before we get into some questions. And actually we've got some questions in the chat box already to raise, but I love that you are, just to refer back to that emotional intelligence piece, because self-awareness is key in all of this. If everything is moving all the time, everything is changing all the time around us, if we can't find the stillness and that self-awareness to understand, okay, what is my compass telling me? Which way do I go? What's going to fulfill me? What's going to, do I need to do this just for the money? And if so, be okay with that? Or do I need to do this to find my deeper purpose? Asking ourselves those really hard questions, and writing exercises. You mentioned, that not just researching, but reflecting and taking time to sit and reflect. I'm a big fan of contemplating. I think that we get distracted a lot. We have all of our devices, all the noise, and we forget to reflect and listen to ourselves. And then, maybe we jump into something that wasn't the best for us, and then we're gone in a week or we're gone in a year, instead of taking that extra time to reflect and contemplate. So thank you, Rachel, for lacing this initial presentation with emotional intelligence to kick us off there with actually we're officially, unofficially changing it from soft skills to power skills, because I think emotional intelligence is definitely a power skill.
I love that. It's really
all right.
So
yes. So folks are already singing your praises in the chat box. I do have some quick questions that are coming up in the chat box that I think will actually be great before we go into the previously submitted questions. And this first question here: how would someone navigate unfamiliar changes when everyone feels lost and it seems like someone is putting the cart before the horse? So I love that this question was dropped in the chat box as you were presenting, because new year, lots of things have been changing the past couple years. As we know, lots of folks are wanting to change their careers. So what do you have to say about this question that was just dropped in the chat box, Rachel?
Yeah, I mean, unfamiliar changes. It sounds like you're referring to the world around us, and when everyone feels lost and it seems like someone is putting the cart before the horse. when I hear cart before the horse, what I'm hearing is probably job searching before you know what you want, perhaps. And let me know if you want to clarify what you mean there. But I always try to encourage people, like when you're operating out of this place of like stress or anxiety, to sort of take a step back and try to apply structure to your process, right? There's steps in the journey. So cart before the horse, to me, sort of begs the question of like, do you understand, what the process is to achieve your goal? Do you have the support and structure and guidance to do it properly? Again, coaching can be a helpful sort of guidepost to say, okay, every week, what are you doing slowly but surely? What is the order of events that you should be taking so that you are open-ended and then you're narrowing in, or whatever steps have to come before the cart before the horse, right? So I would think about support system. But when you also say unfamiliar changes, everyone feels lost. Again, I mean, that begs the question, a little bit of self-care, right? like we've been talking about, all of this craziness in our world today, things become more hectic, more busy, more complex, more confusing, more stressful. Take the time for that reflection to hear yourself. Coaching can be a really powerful thing because, like what Marielle was saying, is like, we're just busy, we live our lives, and then we kind of forget to like stop and think about ourselves, or just kind of process how we're doing and how we're feeling. If you don't necessarily love to journal or meditate, coaching can be a way that you're like, just sort of have an hour devoted to like thinking about you and, where you're at. So whatever space that is, find and make the space for that. I hope that's kind of answering your question. It was slightly vague, so I'm trying to interpret it, but let me know if there's any clarification to the question.
Actually, I do have a follow-up question here. Some private messages are coming in. More info on how to reflect to figure out what you want.
Yes. Reflect. Okay. So basically, it's a little hard to, if you want, usually I do an exercise. If you want me to jump into it, Marielle, I could do a quick 5-10 minute like guided reflection exercise. Feel free to show us if you want to do it. Okay. I'm happy to do that. I didn't, it's interesting because I knew I was going to get questions and I try to preempt them in my slides, but I didn't put every slide. But yes, I do have a quick exercise. If you guys want, I can give you basically the reflection, like literally prompts for you to reflect right here and now. If you guys are ready, I'm happy. Or I can also explain how I think you should reflect, but it's kind of hard because a lot of what I've built is literally is designing the questions you may not know how to ask yourself. And sometimes that's why you would leverage someone else for support. Do you want me to jump into that for 5 minutes or?
Yes, I would love to. Why not?
Okay. Yes. All right. Great. So, yeah, Thomas, that's awesome. The thing about mentorship is, when I talk about networking as a part of career exploration, you really want to be able to go to mentors and professionals with really specific questions about certain roles and industries so that you can learn from them. There's a whole other topic we could talk about in terms of when you're having an informational interview, like you don't necessarily want their opinion per se, you want facts. So, Thomas, it's really good to connect with people and professionals, but how you learn from them effectively, that like we could talk about that after. So feel free to remind me if you guys want to talk about that. But let's do some reflection right here and now. So grab a piece of paper. You could type it digitally. Either one is fine. And basically, I'm going to guide you through some prompts and just jot down like keywords. You don't have to make perfect sentences. It's just like, I'm going to just sort of trigger and facilitate some thoughts. Okay. So let me know when you guys are ready with like a paper or digital memo pad.
I'm ready.
You're ready. Okay, beautiful. Okay, so we're going to start with that first thing that I call the function. This is essentially teasing out what you really like doing and what you're natural at and what gives you energy. So I'm going to guide you through some prompts. All right. So think of a few experiences you chose to take on. Maybe projects within work. It could be a current role or prior roles, or it could be outside of work. You could go all the way back to when you were 15, 16. I want you to think of those top most interesting experiences, whether they were work related or not. ideally you would have chosen to build them. Most likely you chose to do it if it's most interesting to you, or maybe somebody handed you that project. But pick your top 1, 2, or 3 experiences that are coming to your mind, but be as open-minded in your lifetime. These could be hobbies. Anything that it's topmost sort of interesting experience, if you go back and think of all the things, and just write keywords to remind you of what they were. You don't need a whole paragraph, but like give yourself a reminder of what that thing was. And maybe you pick the top 1 from your list. And what you want to do is flesh out like the verbs. What were you doing in that experience? Were you writing? Were you coding? Were you training somebody? Were you advising? Were you like mentoring? Like start fleshing out the sort of subset of the activities that made up that project or that experience. I'll give you like 20 seconds because I know I'm talking quickly, and then I'll keep going. So flesh out what went into that. What were you doing? The verbs, the action phrases, the activities, the skills. Break it down.
This is great, by the way. I thank you for jumping into doing some guided reflection time. I feel like if they're asking for it, we're going to do it, and I think it's definitely beneficial for everyone.
Good. Yeah, this is a quick one, like 5-7 minutes, but it's just the beginning. So it's because it's hard for me to explain like how to do it without. That's what I'm here for, is to help you to actually know what to do. Okay, so once you got that short list of those verbs, now I want you to continue the list. So sort of take a step back and say, okay, these might be some activities or skills that I really love. How do I add to that? What else is missing? Again, be super like open-minded, but like list of skills, verbs, activities, phrases, action phrases that represent the things you really like doing, love doing, gives you energy, natural for you. These are the action-oriented things, right? That natural for you, give you energy, like doing, good at doing, enjoy doing. So just sort of continue that list that you started.
For folks who have their cameras on, I love that I see you all jotting notes. You're such good students here with us today. We're all students, by the way. I think that life is all about learning, and there's never a time to stop learning. So I appreciate you all taking the ball. Oh, you're showing your notebook.
Yeah, it actually helps me because then I'll know when to keep going. So I'm going to reference the people I can see. So again, I'll give you 20, 30 seconds. And I know I'm moving through this quickly, but you can also, you'll continue this after the fact. But I want to just give you like 30 seconds of thinking.
30 seconds of thinking. Yes. Give us more. No.
We'll do 5 minutes. We'll do 5 minutes. But again, this is what coaching is for, because it literally gives you the more space than we have today to continue, right? Okay. Absolutely. So I'm going to keep going. If someone were to ask you to do a project today, what would it be? Doesn't have to be within the realm of your current role. This is just like white space. Maybe they're paying you to do it. Somebody gives you a project. What project should they give you? What project do you want them to give you?
We're going like utopia here.
Utopia. You could think about just looking into something. Maybe maybe you don't know exactly the outcome, but maybe the initial could be looking into a certain problem or topic or something. Or maybe you already know the thing you want to build or change or do, or whatever, right? Maybe, right? So it could be starting point of looking into, right? But as broad, what comes to your head? What project should they give you?
All right, we need to invite Oprah on Nexus. It's like, okay, and you've got your project, and you've got your project, and you've got your project. How do we get that?
God, right. Now we all need to be funded for these exact things. That's exactly right. Well, that's the whole goal, right? Once you reflect on the project you want, then it becomes, let's go find that in the real world. So you're exactly right. Okay, so think of times you help others, or what others come to you for help with. What do you enjoy helping others with? That's another question for you under this same bucket. What do you enjoy helping others with? What do people come to you for help for or with? And you could also think of examples.
And I love that when your first question, you were like, and it could be a hobby, because sometimes we get too serious and it's like, okay, what should I do that will get me paid? But you can turn your hobbies into paid gigs for sure. And just to follow up here with this question, what is like I love going out and thinking of like utopia and then how to like materialize that. So this is great.
I always start as open-ended as humanly possible. You want to give yourself the benefit of the doubt, because exactly to your point, hobbies, career coaching was my hobby. I have a blog about how I turned a hobby into a career. Anyone can do that. Most of your hobbies are a job that someone else does full time. So that's exactly right. And so hobbies are usually choices. And that's why we think about it. There are things you choose, you spend time, you like doing, maybe you're great at. Is that something we could expand upon? Maybe, maybe not, but it's always worth being as open-minded as humanly possible in the beginning. So I always say the process starts really big and then you narrow it in. That's kind of how it goes. Okay, I'm going to go to the second section, okay? Second section is what I call content. Think about what topics you like to read about. And again, I'm going to keep talking. You just keep writing, okay? Topics you like to read about or listen to if you do like podcasts, news, podcasts, articles, social. What do you choose to read, listen to, click on? Right? Give you like 20 seconds on that one. And then I've got more, of course, always have more. Topics you choose to click on, read about, listen to, topics that really stand out. What are you going to click on versus not click on?
How do you train your inner algorithm? I mean, I kind of hate that just came out of my mouth, but they're dishing us all the algorithms. How do you make your own algorithm?
Oh, I love that. I love that. It's so right. Right. Meaning if they weren't learning about you and you were learning about you, what are the patterns of the things you click on? Yes, that data that they have about us, they should be sharing that. I want to know my algorithm. So that's exactly what we're doing. What are the patterns of what you click on, the topics? Okay, I'm going to go to question number 2. Problems in the world you feel need solving. There are so many, but which are the problems that you really care about? And you're like, how is this still a thing? Because there's so many problems, right? And it's like, you can't really care about all of them. I mean, you can, but like, what's top of your list? What's like number 1, 2, 3? And you're like, this is bonkers.
Yeah, we're getting some social impact in here. I love it, Rachel.
Well, yes. That's the thing. Every job helps someone with something. Every industry is helping someone with something. But who you want to help, how, why, where? So let's get deeper, right? What problems do you personally care so much about? And sometimes I've had clients where they worry about like, sometimes social impact, it's like on paper, they think there's certain things, but like, I had a client who was like, oh, I'm interested in fashion, but I don't feel like that's like a meaningful, and okay, but it could be, because what about sustainability? And what about, every industry has things that are important for whatever reason. We're delivering something to somebody in some fashion. Okay. So topics you love learning about or talking about with others. This kind of relates to that first one, but instead of just what you're reading on and clicking on, what do you love to talk about? Like with some of my assessment questions are like, you could talk so much about it. Your friends will be like stop talking. You talk about it so much. You could bore others talking about it and they don't want to listen to you anymore. So let's get you paid to go do it all day. Topics you love talking about, thinking about, learning about.
You didn't know you were coming to class today, did you?
Yeah. I know. The last question is products or services you find interesting. So think about, it could be like a physical product. It could be like a store, a brick and mortar. It could be a digital app or software or website. products and services that, again, this is one of those things where usually we go to our friends, we're like raving and they're like, I don't care. Like products and services that you are just like blown away, think it's innovative, think it's interesting, think it's cool. What are they working on? What are they doing? You're loving it. You're like the ambassador of this company. You're like so into it. It could be something maybe you found out years ago and you've been using it ever since. Products or services that you find important, interesting, innovative, cool.
This is great. And we've got a little under 20 minutes left, just so that everyone knows. So I'm so happy that you all are still on the call and doing this homework. And I'm sure that you all can flesh out these questions a little more when we finish this conversation. But Rachel, this has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Of course. The last third section is the environment. So if you guys want, I'll run through some questions in like a minute, and you could either write down the questions or of course, write down your quick answers. And of course, you can always do this more. And then with our last 15 minutes, I'm happy to answer the actual questions that we have today. So the environment, okay? Small company, medium company, large company. What's the size? Can you picture it in your head? And sometimes the size is a more complex question, because sometimes the grass is always greener if you've never experienced a smaller, larger environment. But where do you think you would thrive? What size organization? What pace? Fast, medium, slow? Is there travel involved? Remote, hybrid, in person? And what's the culture? What's the personality? What are the values? Take 30 seconds and try to write those top traits of like what you want either in the people or the style of that company. What do they value? What's that vibe? What's important to you about the vibe, the culture, the personality, the values, the sort of the intangibles. And again, you can close your eyes and you can picture it. Sometimes people who are really visual, you can see your next steps. You can see what it looks like physically. And sometimes that tells us a lot about the environment we're seeking. And then you could start to describe what you're seeing. But that's like an intuition of kind of your, what's next for you, what looks exciting, what feels exciting, what does it look like, and what does that tell you about the type of company you might want to be in. And then you can add anything else, bells and whistles, right? So the bottom line is continue this. This is the beginning. Whoever asked the question about how do we reflect, this is the beginning. You want to continue. And by the way, now it's all going to be happening in the back of your head. So in the next day or two or whenever, just keep adding to the list. Functions, content, environment. Then if you remember that whole flow chart, you translate the functions into potential roles. You translate the content into potential industries. Then when you learn deeply, accurately about each role in each industry, that's when you can effectively compare, contrast, and determine which one feels like the best or the best fit for me of these options. And that could take, by the way, I didn't really talk about the timeline. It could take 2 to 3 months. It's, the way I do it, it's all self-paced, but give yourself 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Give yourself the time to work through this. Depends how much time you put in. You could put in a little time every day or a little time every week. It's totally up to you. But give yourself the space to just go figure it out before you apply to anything. Cool? Okay, I'll answer the real questions now, or the other questions.
But I think that actually in your presentation to kick us off that you did when you shared your screen and also through this exercise, I think you have answered a lot of questions that were previously submitted. And actually I'm getting some private messages here saying thank you. So thank you. All right. So I appreciate you highlighting that reflective piece, that, figuring out where you are in your journey, how to take the next step. So let's assume that someone has done the research. They know, who they want to apply to and all that jazz. Let's get more specific about resume questions. So this question leads to that here. I have worked in a few different industries developing transitional skills in each and can't seem to articulate the cohesion on my resume. What are tools and or verbiage I can use within my resume or cover letter to streamline my myriad of experience?
So that's a good question. It really depends, because maybe your experiences have a theme and maybe they are streamlined and maybe they are similar or connected and maybe they're not. So what I would say is like, you want to start by accurately representing what it is that you did in each role on your resume. And then when you understand your direction, you can tailor the resume so that those keywords, you can say the same thing in a different way that feels more relevant to the direction you're going after. So make it sound as transferable and relevant as possible. But I don't think you necessarily need to like connect each of the roles, streamline them together. Now, if you're saying, how do I kind of tell the story of who I am? I really like, people debate the professional summary, the objective on the resume. I like it if you know how to use it. The formula that I like to suggest is background, strengths, direction. One sentence background, and that includes your functional areas of expertise and your industries of exposure. The strengths, why, what you're great at, what your superpower is, what your secret sauce is in one sentence, and then your direction, where do you want to go? That 3-sentence summary is an amazingly powerful, concise way to share with them who you are in a way that you want them to understand. That takes a little bit of time and workshopping and wordsmithing, but if you can sort of synthesize who you are, then they will understand it because you are writing it the way that they should understand it. That's the beauty of the summary, if you know how to do it. So that's kind of my answer. Like, I don't think you need to like, and maybe I'm not hearing it correctly, but I don't think you necessarily need to like make sure like each role feels connected necessarily. When they ask you the question, walk me through your journey, walk me through your background, that's when you would explain like, what'd you do and why'd you go to the next place? What'd you do and why'd you go to the next place? What'd you do and why'd you go to the next place? And then what are you trying to do next? So you explain the logic of what you were hoping to learn at each segue. And as long as there's logic to it of like, why did you go to that next thing? You were hoping to learn more about A, B, and C. That's when you explain it. The resume just has to explain what you did, tailor it towards your direction, use that summary. I have some like other kind of resume template stuff that's like, I would have to send it to you, but there are ways you can be creative with it. So that's the other thing is like, be as creative as you want or need. Like add a section. If you're like, my goals, my strengths, my direction, like add whatever you want to the resume in a way that speaks to you. But the other thing I'll just say about the resume is like, get it clean, get it in a way that you're happy with, get help so that you don't like spend a year doing this, and then be done. Because the main thing is like who you're meeting. Are you networking? Are you getting your foot in the door? Do you understand your direction? And how are they meeting you? And how are you talking about yourself? And how are you pushing your direction? The resume, most jobs are not landed through online applications. So like get your resume good, get it solid, and then create opportunities for them to hear from you and meet you so you can share the story, which is way more important and powerful than the piece of paper.
Yes, yes. I love that. I love your tips on that. And so can you just bridge this over to LinkedIn? Because we had a couple questions on how can people leverage their LinkedIn. And so maybe, I mean, I would love to hear your reflections on that. And maybe they can use that as an opportunity to speak more since if they, can't put things on their resume. But what do you think about how to leverage your LinkedIn?
Yes. So LinkedIn is obviously the digital resume. It has no page limit. So of course you can add as much as you want. Keywords are important from that algorithm perspective. People will find you. So use keywords as much as you can. The headline is another really good place where that headline right under your name, you can really describe, that becomes the bridge for what you've done, but where you want to go. That's where you can be really artful to try to make that bridge happen. Show them in the headline what you should be hired to do, pretty much. Keywords, again, from the search perspective, from the algorithm perspective, use keywords throughout the whole thing of what you want to be found for or what you want to go do next. The about section, that professional summary that I just mentioned, that would go in the about section. You can add skills, you add your recommendations. Of course, you adjust your settings so people find you. I mean, there's a lot we could talk about in terms of just like optimizing your profile. But again, it's one of those things where if I help a client, I'm like, LinkedIn, it's going to take you an hour, boom, 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 do all these things. And then it becomes, how do you use LinkedIn? How do you network? How do you find connections? How do you reach out to people? LinkedIn to me is the best research tool for, it's like everyone's there. I mean, it's kind of like who works where. I mean, that's, wow, like we need that. So we need that, right? But the profile, it's important, but like it's the same thing with the resume, like get it done, get it clean, get it great, and then it's done. You set it and forget it. Maybe once a month, you could look at the resume and the LinkedIn and optimize it a little bit, but don't people over-index so much on those materials. Get it clean, get it great, and then they got to meet you as a person. Talk to them, meet them virtually, whatever. Like, introduce yourself, get your foot in the door. That's the stuff that matters. Yeah. Does that
That's great.
hopefully answer?
Absolutely. And it gives you more mental space to focus on other things. So like I do it and be done with it and move on to the next. And of course, come back and check in to update and optimize. I love that, because if not, we can just get super overwhelmed with all the things on social media. And, you know, LinkedIn, as you said, is a good research tool. But again, they have to meet you either virtually or physically. So, okay, we've got about 8 minutes left.
You can also do like thought leadership too, like, right? So LinkedIn's good for research. It's obviously a job board, but also like if you're posting articles, writing articles, commenting, being in the conversation, that's another good use for LinkedIn. There's different uses, but I guess my point is just like, don't go crazy on the profile. The profile, get it great, and then just like use it in think about all the other activities that are going to help you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. We've got about 7 minutes left, and I want to make sure we get to this question about money, since we're talking about, you know, we're going from how to dream big and how to, you know, put our goals out there, how to reflect, how to write things down, and all these things. So let's talk about money. This question reads, how should I prepare for the potential difference in salary? And I would love, Rachel, if you could make this a little more optimistic, because people automatically think when you change careers, you're going to like get paid less. And I would just love to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, it depends. So like, number one, career exploration is the process of learning. If you're debating a certain pivot, understand the salary that you'd start at and understand the future potential. Literally just understand it before you make a decision. That's the beauty. You don't have to act. You don't have to quit. You don't have to apply to everything. You don't have to pivot until you understand the path. And what you're balancing is multiple factors of, would I be great at it? Would I love it? And would it support me? What would it look like now? And what would it look like in the future? You have to think about all those factors. And so if you decide on a certain pivot, then there's a few components. Sometimes, depending on the nature of the pivot and how much you're pivoting, sometimes you can still be hired like at your level commensurate because you have experience in managing teams and you have relevant experience, but maybe it's a different function or different team, or, you know, if it's a similar role, different industry, that you won't have to worry, right? That's, you're still going to be at your commensurate level. If you feel like you're pivoting so much so that you have to start from the bottom again, it just becomes a matter of understanding that and really just deciding like, is that okay for you? Like, you know, your life, and you kind of have to take an assessment of, can I support myself on this? But what's that future potential? And also, for example, if you're in a smaller organization, can I get promoted more quickly? You know, sometimes, and you want to ask questions where you get concrete answers, because certain organizations like may actually promote just when you're ready, versus sometimes it's like a once a year thing. And sometimes there's a very fixed ladder where you wait your turn, and when the manager gets promoted, you get promoted. So you want to understand how that works. Sometimes I've seen people go pivot where they're like kind of lateral, but then 3 months later, when everyone really knew they were a little more senior, then all of a sudden changes get made after the fact. So there's a lot of different things, asking questions to the organization, the size of the organization, and the nature of the pivot, and understanding it deeply in your learning process before you make any decisions. I mean, those are the initial thoughts that I have. If I'm like missing something, let me know.
No, this is great. I love the thoughtfulness there in that response. And I know that everyone's worried about the money, and so it's good to just nip that in the bud. And of course, to know that there are steps to take before coming to that question. Of course, equity is real. We need to be, you know, supporting pay equity across the board. So that goes without saying, but just to have that initial step of reflection and making sure that you're taking the right step that you want to take. So actually we have a question here. Can you share the guide for this exercise? And I think that this is just a great opportunity to remind folks how they can connect with you and maybe have like, you know, a one-on-one and learn more about the process.
You know, it's a really good question. So Mariella, if you remind me, what I can do is type up the questions that I just said. But ironically, like on my website, I don't really like have like these written somewhere. But what I do have, I have like an 80+ question assessment. So if we work together and you want to get some coaching, you would literally start with, so we just did a very mini version. So if I were to coach somebody, the assessment is that first step, and it's a much bigger version of the thing we just did. So the answer is I sell that. But I can send out via email the things that we just talked about.
Right. And just to remind folks, if you signed up for this, you will get a rewatch email with links to resources, ways to connect with Rachel. Also, you'll get the link to this video so that you can rewatch, because I know we're like going through this quickly because you all had some really great questions, and we wanted to make sure that we honored everyone's time. And I love that everyone took the initiative to go through this exercise with us. So I definitely recommend rewatching this, and just making sure that you were able to dive deeply into the questions that Rachel proposed to you all. So with that said, we've got about 3 minutes left. So Rachel, is there anything else that you'd like to speak to? I know that I didn't read you all of the questions that folks submitted previous, but you definitely tackled the majority of them just in your reflections and walking us through the exercise. And so is there anything else that you think would be great to leave us with, food for thought, and just remind us again how we can connect with you when we finish this conversation?
Yes. Well, the pre-submitted questions, if I didn't answer them, like, again, I offer a free call, like we can just literally, I'm happy to answer your questions directly. So feel free. I mean, we had the list of pre-submitted questions, but you can ask them to me after this call. The other keys to success that I might have sort of mentioned, I always think about 3 things: mindset, accountability, practical strategy. Those are my 3 keys to really achieving any goal. First, mindset. Understand the mindset, get support on your mindset, figure out if there's anything holding you back. When you feel ready, accountability, putting in the time, putting in the routine, where and when and how is this going to happen? 3, the guidance on how to go about it strategically and effectively. Do you have that guidance? Do you know how to go about it? Those 3 things to me are what you need. But yeah, in terms of getting in touch, I could put the links again here. I mean, if anyone has a question I can answer in 1 minute, I'm happy to. But other than that, I hope this was helpful. Stay in touch, guys. I'm here. I really want to help as much as humanly possible. And it was really good to chat with you guys today and kick off the new year in such a good way.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rachel. And for those who were not able to join us live, but they're rewatching this, can you just verbally say your website out loud or your social network so that people can connect with you there?
Oh, yes, verbally. Yes. It's iamwoken.com. And then, from there, you can actually just book time with me. But yes, iamwoken.com. Thank you, Mariella.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. And so I definitely recommend folks who were able to drop their LinkedIns or preferred ways of connecting in the chat box, click around. Let them know that you joined this conversation so that you know that you're already, like-minded in changing careers and just being, authentic with your career change. And hopefully you all can support each other after this conversation and continue to keep that encouragement flowing. Rachel, thank you so much. It's been great. Thank you everyone who's joined us live. And if you're rewatching, thank you again for rewatching. Good luck. Live your truth, speak your truth. We need you to do that more than ever now. Things are changing, and we need everyone to try to reflect more and go for what is going to help them feel more whole, and also their community as well. So thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your year. Oh my goodness.